Are you thinking of starting a podcast? There are a couple of things that you need to consider. Well, first off, you need to consider your why. You need to know if you're doing this for spiritual reasons or for financial reasons. Now, when I say financial reasons, I mean cold hard cash. But when I say spiritual reasons, I mean reasons that are tied into some huge mission, some gospel, some vision that you are trying to achieve. For instance, I'm talking to someone who is thinking of starting a podcast because she wants to get children interested in reading scripture. And she's not worried about how you can turn that into revenue anytime soon. So, her reasons for starting a podcast are spiritual. Some people are thinking of saving the environment or advancing the cause of sickle cell research, stuff like that. So there are lots of reasons why people are starting podcasts that are not tied to how much money that they are going to make. Now, for my own podcast, on the other hand, I'm trying to use this as a credibility play so that I can leverage it for paid speaking, consulting, and coaching engagements. So, my own reasons for having a podcast are financial, while the lady who is concerned about children reading scripture, her own motivations are spiritual. So, the why is important. Why are we doing this? Now, this is the reason why that's important. Because if your motives are spiritual, then you have to consider the cost of keeping things going and how married you are, how wedded you are to that particular gospel that you are pursuing. And you also need to consider if you are well financed to keep the things going. Now, all this is really, really important. Now, for someone like me who has financial reasons for starting a podcast, I'm able to weigh, I'm able to have a cost benefit analysis at the end of the day. I've made so many episodes, I've spent so many hours. How much do I expect to get back? How many consulting gigs am I doing right now? How much money am I making? So there's some analysis, some cost benefit analysis that can go into the whole thing. But then, if you're thinking chiefly spiritual, then sometimes the cost benefit analysis is not that easy to make. So you have to consider the cost of keeping it going because it will involve costs. For instance, back to the lady who wants children to read more scripture. She's going to have to pay for an editor. What else? Videography services. So editing, videography services. She's going to do the moderation by herself. And also, let's see what else. Okay, she's doing social media moderation. She has to pay for editing. Okay, well, anyway, so far we've come up with two costs. Now, paying for an editor every single week for a whole year, you know, that's 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 some change. That's some moolah. Now, it's definitely not going to cost, let's say, 15,000 a month. It's definitely going to be more than that. I mean, of course, if your younger brother is the one who's going to provide those services, then yeah, you can give him 15 or 20K every month, and he'll do that for you gladly. But then, if you want a certain level of professionalism or accountability, you're going to start considering other kinds of professionals, and then the cost profile rises. And then all of a sudden, this podcast of yours that you are attached to for spiritual reasons now becomes rather costly, especially if you have a family and other commitments. So you're going to be paying for, in this case, you'll be paying for videography services every month, editing services every month. Now, she's not going to have to pay for hosting because I advise people, excuse me, that they can start on Anchor, just like I'm doing. Well, Anchor has been bought over by Spotify. But bottom line is, if you're going to do this thing for spiritual reasons, there are hard costs. You need to run that calculation and you need to be able to figure out, am I going to be able to keep coughing up this dough? So, back to the 15K example, assuming she's only spending 15K. So let's say it's a younger brother. You give your younger brother 5K so he can edit the stuff, and maybe the videographer goes to the same church as you, and then he takes maybe 10K a month. By the way, these are ridiculous figures that I'm giving. It's not going to be that low, but just in case you're that lucky and you're able to get both services for 15K every month, at the very least that is 100, and okay, 10 is 150K, then extra 2 months that would be 30, so that's 180. Okay, so that should be 180 grand for the year. So you need to ask yourself that question. Am I that capitalized? Do I have an extra 180 grand every single year to keep this thing going, especially for the 3 or 4 years that it might take this thing to take off? You need to ask yourself all these questions. Now, if you're doing this for financial reasons, starting your podcast for financial reasons, you need to consider if you have realistic expectations for when your podcast is going to start bringing you money. The financial returns that you will get from podcasts, if you are doing this for financial reasons, will come through sponsors or advertising. Well, clearly, I'm not pursuing that on this show. So, sponsors are advertising, selling coaching services. What else? Promoting paid consulting, and then trying to get speaking engagements. So, those are some of the ways that people monetize their podcasts. So, financial returns. How long do you think it's going to take for you to garner a certain kind of influence or audience base that will make sponsors start running after you? So you have to ask yourself that kind of question. And then you also need to consider that for podcasting or for other forms of content marketing, especially long form content, podcasting is considered long form because of the amount of time that your audience or your fans or whatever or your community has to invest to to reap the benefits of the content that you're producing. So those of you who are writing blogs, long blogs, 1,000 words, 2,000, 3,000 every day, that's long form video. Okay, well, certain kinds of video are considered long form. I think 10 minutes is considered long form. So podcasting, long videos, long essays, that kind of content marketing, it usually requires a long-term investment to pay off. So bottom line, if you start this podcast in January, don't expect to start making money in March. Possible that you might start the podcast in 2023 and you might not make any money until 2024, 5, or 6. So you have to ask yourself those questions. So these are some of the things that you have to look into if you're thinking of starting a podcast, especially in the coming year, now that 2023 is coming to a close and everybody's all geared up and thinking about what to do for 2024. Now, what are the other things that you should consider with your podcast? You should also think about the format. Is it going to be solo style, just like me, you speaking into a microphone or your phone or a recorder or a camera? Or is it going to be the guest format where you interview someone? So those are the two major styles, more or less. Okay, yes. So now the interview format is the much more popular format. People start the show and you have someone on the other end of the table, and then you guys have a conversation, you have some back and forth, and you get to share your interesting ideas. Now, this is the most popular format of podcasting, but it does have a downside that I think you guys ought to be aware of, especially if you're trying to use this podcast for financial reasons. Now, when you have a podcast and it's guest based, interview based, you can't showcase subject matter expertise. You can't make yourself out to be the Don or what's the female version of Don? Okay, I guess whether you're a guy or a girl, you can call yourself a Don. So you can't showcase yourself to be the Don because you're constantly having to bring in new guests all the time. And you can show yourself off to be an interesting personality, but maybe not the subject matter expert that you want to be perceived at. And then for the interview podcast, more logistics and planning are required. You have to book appointments. First of all, you have to look for people who are interested in coming on your show, book their appointment, sync your calendars, remind them when they miss recording dates, decide on whether it's physical locations or not, deal with people coming late, booking the studio, what else? Getting your office ready if people are coming over to your office. And then there's also online recording challenges if you guys decide to do it online. Recording sessions drop out whether you're using Skype or Zoom or Microsoft Teams. I was going to say WhatsApp, but I don't know of anybody who does podcast recording over WhatsApp, but I guess that should be possible. Okay, that's something I should look into in the future. So there are these online recording challenges. Of course, the only way to solve for those problems is to have an audio guy on hand who's actually recording everything and who's going to have to splice up the audio once you're done. Cut out the parts where the internet failed or somebody's device failed or whatever. You're going to need some cleanup. Then there's audio editing. Okay, yes, I already mentioned audio editing. And then you also have to meet the editorial needs of your guests because you interview people, and then by the time they're done, people also want to be careful. Did I reveal too much? Did I talk about this too much? Did I say some things that might have been confidential? So, of course, you're done with the podcast recording. You hand it over to them so they listen to it, and maybe they think, you know what, take this one out, or maybe you didn't say this correctly, you didn't say that correctly. We need to follow up on this, follow up on that. So these are all the challenges and the downsides of when it comes to the guest format. So number one, you're not a subject matter expert. Well, I mean you are, but you can't really showcase that. Number two, all this logistics and planning that is required can be a headache. So, if you run a solo show like me, if you're contemplating a solo show like me, then you can show that you're the Don or that you have a handle on the topic because this podcast is me solo, over 730 episodes so far. And clearly, if you've listened from before COVID up until now, I mean, clearly you know that I have a handle on what I'm talking about, and I know my onions. I mean, this is my topic because you can catch me, wake me up in the middle of my sleep. You can catch me whether I'm happy, sad, angry, hungry, hungry, whatever it is, and I'm going to be able to give you an intelligent opinion when it comes to sales challenges, sometimes marketing challenges, but primarily sales, especially from a perspective of personal selling. And then, of course, I have none of the pre production challenges or post production costs that come into these sorts of things. Now, if you decide that in 2024 you're still going to do an interview format for your podcast, can you use the interview format to show that you're a subject matter expert? Then, sure. There are some people who do that by using postscripts after the show. So you add the part where you were asking the person question, the person was answering, and then you put a little clip to say, "Oh, that was the podcast episode. In summary, this is what we learned. These are the major thrusts of the conversation. In my own professional opinion, you should do this way, you should do that way. So you do the commentary in the postscripts. There are some people who do that in a, what do you call it? Is it pro? No, okay, prologue comes after. Well, I'm not sure what the pre thing is, the one that comes before. So there's some podcasters who do the pre thing, the whole thing of, hello, welcome to the show. Today I'm interviewing Dr. So and so or Professor Mrs. So and so. This is what we talked about. These were the conclusions. This is the overarching narrative. From my own professional perspective, you should be paying attention to this and this and this and that. And after this, you should execute on ABC and 1, 2, 3 and enjoy the show. So you can do that. That's a way of putting your own what would I say? Putting your own opinion or your own professional slant on the interview, either before it happens or after it happens. And then there are some people who interject a lot during the interviews to insert their own opinions. So those are the options that are available. Okay, so over 10 minutes, so let me bring this to a close. Now, why am I bringing up this topic today? It's because there's going to be an upcoming podcast by my new friend who is part of the Alumni UK initiative. If this is your first time of listening to the show, Jen, then scroll back maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and there was a part where I did a podcast episode on networking, and I used the Alumni UK initiative as a case study. It's something that has been started by the Kingdom of the by the United Kingdom. So it's something that is being what's that word? Should I say executed or orchestrated? Anyway, whatever the word is, the UK government is doing it through the British Council, Alumni UK, an association of anybody who has graduated from universities in the United Kingdom. And I use that as an example to show how You can try formal networking initiatives, and you can put them to good use to develop your career or to develop your business. So, by virtue of being a part of the network, I finished my master's program in the University of Aberdeen. That's why I had my master's in oil and gas law. So, by being a part of the Alumni UK initiative, I've been chatting with lots of people there who have really, really interesting things. Some of them you might hear about on the podcast. But one of my new friends from the Alumni UK initiative is Dr. Itari Turner. She's a former university lecturer in Abuja. I think it's Bays. Is it Bays or Blaze? Well, one of these private universities. Her academic specialty, her PhD is in human resources, amongst other things. Now, so she has a podcast that is going to roll out in 2024. And I'm going to keep you guys updated on Dr. Itari's show. I'm also scheduled to make a guest appearance on her own podcast. And then she has a series of events lined up for 2024, and it's built around not just business motivation, but also around execution. Because being pumped up and motivated is one thing, but you need to know the ABC, the one, two, three, the what am I going to do next to be successful in business. And that's what I focus on over here on the podcast. So for me, less fluff, more execution. So that's the reason why I'm bringing it up today. Basically, Dr. Itari, a podcast is coming out, and uh, I always let you guys know whenever there's a new entrant into a space or I discover a show and I think is going to be valuable. So keep your eyes peeled. Okay, it should be your ears since you consume podcasts using your ears. So keep your ears peeled or keep your ears open for Dr. Itari's show. I'll let you guys know when it launches. And also, if you are inspired by this podcast or by her own podcast, and you're thinking that whether for spiritual reasons or for financial reasons you want to start a podcast, these are the things that you ought to consider. So, are you thinking of starting a podcast? Then hit me up. I will share resources with you on how to get started. I have paid coaching options available, but I'll share resources for free, especially stuff that you can find anyway, readily available online, so you can do it yourself. But if you think you need some help, then I'll be glad to help you out with that. So that's all for today, folks. Remember to connect with me on WhatsApp. The number is 080 64662140, and the country code is +234. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Tavishima Ayede. I'm on other socials, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. Don't worry about the spelling. You can confirm that and the spelling of my name and my email address on the website where you're listening to this episode, or the profile of the podcast app where you're currently listening to my voice. So thanks for your time and attention. I will catch you guys at the next episode.